Joy doesn't have to wait for vacation. More importantly, it shouldn't wait for vacation. Welcome back to the Humaning Well podcast. My name is Amber Cabral, and this is probably the third time I've recorded this episode. So normally I script these out. And I have like my talking points kind of positioned where I can take a look at them as I'm going so that I stay on track and I know what I want to share. But this episode has been really hard for me. I'm not entirely why. And then, I tried to shoot it yesterday and now I'm shooting it today. And then today I woke up and I have acne. So like, I'm also like, I don't want to put makeup on because I have acne, but then you want to put makeup on to hide the acne. So I don't know what's up with like acne in your 40s. I mean, I know what's up, but either this episode is going to really take off or, the world is just hazing me right now like it is everybody else. So just wish me luck. Right. So during the pandemic, I'm going to start with a story. Okay. So during the pandemic, I found a resort in Mexico. I believe it was in Riviera Maya that I really, really love to escape to. It took me a little while to be brave enough to do it, but eventually I was like, you know what? I need to get out this house. And so I would watch for specials like a hawk. And then I would stay for these like really ridiculously long, sprawling visits at this resort. I was doing very well financially at that time and could do that. I had a favorite room. I had a favorite, like they assign you like a wait staff person. I had a favorite person for that. It was ridiculous, but I hit my real experience of burnout in 2020. And I never felt so recharged as I did when I was on this resort. So like as ridiculous as it was, and looking back, I mean, it was pricey, but I mean, I wasn't wilding, although I was wilding. I was trying to get away. So anyway, I really, really love sunrises and sunsets and the sky in general, but the sunrise at this resort was so magical. So one morning I got up really early. I went down to the beach. I set my phone up to record the sunrise because I wanted to be able to take something that I really loved about that place, like back with me. I was living in DC at the time. DC did kind of, maybe not as extreme as New York with the lockdowns, but it was like, like we still were kind of like lining up to go in the grocery store type vibes. And so I recorded the sunrise so that I could watch it whenever I wanted to. And I literally set it up so that like I had a little over an hour of sunrise. And then when I got home at the beginning of my first week being back from this particular trip, I was back in my like, oh my gosh, I miss that place so much. And so I took my phone and I sent the recording to my iPad and I set my iPad up and ran myself a bath. And before I got in, I turned off all the lights, hit play, and I totally just like sat in the water and imagined I was back at the beach, just listening to the waves and seeing the sunrise. I mean, I didn't even mind the big ass tractor cleaning seaweed thing, going past in the video. It was just so calming. And I did not know it then, but I think that was the moment where I decided that I wanted to live a life where sunsets or sunrises were accessible to me. And that I wanted a tub that I could dip my entire body in, because this place also had a really big tub. Like it was like sitting in a big cereal bowl for your body. And it was the first point where I was intentional about how I experienced my own life and how I understood that the impact of being intentional about, making decisions for my own life, how that could have a major impact on my well-being. I am a better woman when I get to experience the sunrise or a sunset on a regular basis. Who decided that that should be an experience that's reserved for just vacations? Why can't it be something that I can access as a part of my everyday life? So that experience led me to making better well-being decisions overall, where and how I live, what I eat, what I spend on, how I invest, and even the kind of work that I am willing to do, because I realized that when I feel better, I perform better. That sunrise in Mexico also taught me something else important, which is that joy doesn't have to wait for vacation. More importantly, it shouldn't wait for vacation. So you don't have to put off the experiences that restore you until you can escape your life. You can choose to design a life where joy is woven into your everyday. You can choose to design a life where joy exists even when there is labor. So what prompted this episode is that I feel like the whole internet is ablaze with the great lock-in thing. And as a person who kind of lives my life locked in, the fact that the quote unquote great lock-in idea has gotten so much attention kind of got me thinking like, yo, I think most people really want a good life. And so like people are like locking in to try to get closer to their quote unquote good life. And by good life, I don't mean necessarily like luxury and extravagance, though those things can certainly be a part of it and they're nice. I mean, having a home that you feel at peace in, having friends and family that you actually enjoy, feeling connected to your community, having hobbies that fulfill you, having access to the things that you need without constant stress. But here's the part that we don't talk about enough. For most of us, having those things requires work. We gotta work. And a lot of us, I think, are doing the work part really wrong. There was a time I definitely was doing it wrong. And doing the work thing wrong, in my observation, has usually played out in like one of two ways. Either you end up working in a cycle where work feels really heavy and exhausting and like something you constantly want to escape from. And then you eventually do escape by vacationing or shutting down for a weekend or consuming, large quantities of things that aren't necessarily the best for you. Or you peep that this life thing done well can have a long tail, and you learn to find your way toward work that may be challenging, but is also fulfilling. You may not love it, but you don't hate it. And it doesn't leave you feeling empty when you're done. In fact, in the event that it is work that you simply can't tolerate, you learn to set yourself up so you get to experience joy alongside the labor. Those are the two options. I'm going to grind, and then I'm going to vacate. And then I'm going to hate coming back from vacationing. Or I'm going to work and I'm going to do what I got to do and I'm going to do my best at it and I'm going to try really hard. And I may not love it, but I get something from it. I see the value, or I may really not like it at all, but I have figured out how to bake in things along the way that give me the joy. When I think about humaning well, I am referring to the latter example, living a life where you are seeing your experience of it as a whole thing, not like parts, not like the vacation part and the curious part and the working part. Like there is no reason for me to look at my life in these chunks. Like, you know what? I'm going to lock in because I'm always locked in. Working is a part of my world. Okay. And I intentionally make sure when I have seasons where I need to work harder, I am infusing joy along that journey. When work has a lot more flow, I still infuse the joy on that journey. Work is a part of my life. There is no work-life balance. Work is just a piece. And my whole life needs wellness. It's not going to always be perfect. It's not going to always feel great, but all of it needs wellness. And so, like I said, ultimately, I think what people really want is joy. They want people in homes that they enjoy. They want friends and family that they love. They want access to community. They want time for fun. They want freedom from being stressed out or anxious. But I think many of us get trapped in extremes, never working hard at all or grinding endlessly, but shortcutting to get to the pleasure. And some of us make the choice to not grind at all. And those folks sometimes end up living perpetually with some unfair constraints. Maybe that's living check to check. Maybe it's always a month behind on the bills. Maybe it's squeezing by on exploitive payday loans or never really getting a chance to go on vacation ever. But those folks don't also have the discomfort of like grinding or locking in, right? And so that's what those folks are often trying to avoid. And then there are the folks that grind the hardest all the time in all the ways, who then relax on those huge vacations that I talked about, the over the top celebrations, overindulging to celebrate, and then repeat the same cycle over and over. I think what I'm trying to get to, and I'm sorry, this episode's a little rambly because this is a hard one for me, but working to human better has shown me that a better approach is intentionally elevating your baseline so that both my effort and my enjoyment are sustainable, they're aligned, and they feel good to me. I figure out what is the baseline that I gotta have all the time. That does mean that I have to earn a certain way to be able to afford my baseline, but it also means that I am earning the ability to not be miserable. So like my work is earning two things. It is earning my baseline and it's also earning me the option to not be miserable. So I have thus chosen for my variety of working hard to compensate me well and align strongly to my values and interests so that hitting burnout is a little harder to do. And though my work is challenging, I am very fulfilled by doing the work. I'm also clear that when the moment comes where I am not fulfilled, I get to move around. So when I do take vacation, it too feels really good to me. But my work isn't so difficult that going back feels impossible because I have an elevated baseline. So even when I'm working, I'm still getting the good things in. Joy and excitement, experiences and experimentation, they are not so far reaching that they feel once in a lifetime when I'm on vacation. In my daily life and in my vacationing, my life stays really close to what I have defined as my elevated baseline. My elevated neutral is here. And so I get to live a life locked in to my income, to my joy, to my relationships, to my opportunities to try new things and much, much more. And I do want to say I'm using this term like elevated neutral or elevated baseline because I do think, sometimes people may hear that and assume that I mean like neutral as in low or basic. And I'm not suggesting that like you settle at a level that feels low or basic. I am saying to consider what is the level of living where you get to have the things that you like mostly in your life every day. You like matcha in the morning. You like room temperature sparkling water all day. You like midday naps. You like sunsets. You like being able to live in a community that's walkable. You like going to the park. You like cruising the neighborhood with your drone. You got to do this job for this season. Okay, you got to do it. It's part of what the assignment is right now. What can you have a side of that makes it a little easier for you to push through? So like I really value good quality sheets. I like nice glassware. I like eating my meals when they're plated, right? I like good flatware. I care about having an organized home with organized cabinets and easy, healthy snacks for days when maybe I didn't do my best with my eating. I intentionally make the mundane parts of my life that are just about taking care of my core needs feel a little elevated. I toss shower steamers in my shower. I use a towel warmer. So when I get out of the shower or out of the bath, I get to wrap myself in something warm and cozy. I am selective about many things that are a part of my day to day because I like living. I don't always like working. But if I can get like working to include some of these elevated elements, if I can get my day to day to include some of these elevated elements, it feels better. And I don't want most of my life to be something that I feel like I need to escape from because we spend a lot of our time at work. And I love vacationing, but like I also really love when I get to go home and get in my own bed, and I value that. I don't just, think that we should be evaluating our lives in parts. I don't think we should be looking at it like the work goals are over here, the family goals are over there, health goals are in this bucket. I think that that's how most of us look at our life. Like, ooh, I've been doing good with my health, so I got to go hard in the paint over there, or I need to do better with family. So, and there are going to be times where things need your attention. I'm not in denial about that, but I do think most of us were taught to think about like trying to get everything to operate on all cylinders or at this certain level all the time. And we have to be a lot more fluid than that. And in our fluidity, what does it look like for us to decide this is the level I'm at? And I like this level. So even when I got to operate at that level, even when I know this is the lowest level for me and that may make me a little nervous, this is the level. And there are things at this level that I like. The other option is that it leaves us, like chasing fragments of wholeness instead of actually experiencing wholeness itself. I want the formula of life where most of my life feels pretty good. After all, it's my life, right? I get to say on how my life feels. And so I'm going to take advantage of that. And so what is your formula for feeling whole? And I want you to be honest with yourself on that. In what way are you potentially having things that are in the way of wholeness for you? What does that look like? What is in the way of you being whole? What can you change that would get you closer to what you want your elevated neutral to be? It might be gardening. It might be having Sundays free. It might be living where you can see the mountains every morning. I don't know. I have a couple friends who play chess. It could be making sure that you get some chess time in every week. I like Legos. I say it all the time. Okay. What are we doing to make sure that that's happening? The point is, I think, that I'm trying to make is that humaning well is about refining your discernment. It's about getting crystal clear on what actually makes you feel whole and intentional, and like deliberately weaving that into your everyday life, even the parts that are hard, especially the parts that are hard. And I use work here because work is often the part that's hard, but you might be at the place where like parenting is the part that's kicking your tail. You know what I mean? If we see humaning well as like refining my discernment, refining what is actually going to be invited into my world that like hits me in the right way, and getting good at assessing that, I think when you do that, you can stop oscillating between, ooh, I got to grind and then I got to escape. We stop waiting for vacations to feel alive. And instead you live closer to your good every single day, your elevated baseline, right? And in the seasons where you find yourself in a situation where you are really working hard towards something, it's because it's something that you really want. And that alone will give you joy. I am currently working on a project that totally lights me up. It is so exciting that I can barely work on it because I am so excited about it. Okay. And so that's adding to my joy and not just my paycheck, but I am also having to exchange time to make this thing happen. I also want to make sure that I say that I am clear that when I speak about humaning well, I'm not always talking about spending a lot of money on like luxury or extravagance or just really anything. I'm not suggesting that you need to buy anything to elevate your baseline. An elevated, neutral experience could mean that you take a nap during lunch every day so that you're recharged for the second half of the day. I remember when I used to work in a call center, a car nap was necessary every day. I'd eat my lunch in that first 30 minutes. That second 30 minutes was all about making sure that I got to look at the back of my eyelids before I had to hop back on the phone. And so defining your elevated neutral to me comes from being intentional about what makes your life feel good and sustainable on a day-to-day basis. And that could be something small and entirely free, right? It could be about presence or choices instead of price tags. Now, I always like to give you some tools to consider. So here are some questions you can sit with. And again, I'm so sorry if this episode is rambly. Like it's been so hard for me to like get this concept out of my head in a neat way. But I did come up with some questions that I think would be good for you to think about as you consider what your own good life looks like. So the first question is, what's one small joy that makes you feel grounded? And how can you bring that into your daily life? Small joy, little thing, okay? Not huge life-changing shifts, little thing you can bring into your life. What is that? Where are you relying on escape instead of creating everyday good? Okay, so where are you saying, oh, if I could just make it 3 more weeks, if I could just get through these 3 more weeks, okay? Instead of saying, okay, today's going to be tough, but here are the things I'm going to do to make it good for me, right? What are we doing to get to that place? The third one is, what habits or shortcuts are costing you more stress in the long run? Listen, I have a couple folks in my life right now that are wearing me out because they are so used to doing things the way that they're doing them. And those things are digging them in deeper and deeper stress holes. And I'm just like, you got to stop doing the thing. You got to stop doing it. It's so funny. I just looked off to my left here and I see the last little bit of a sunset. And it's like, oh my God, I want to like pause the recording and watch it, right? That's how you know you made a good decision. All right. My next question for you to consider is, what do you really need to just fix or address things so that you're not like dragging them along? So very similar to the other question. Okay, what habits or shortcuts are costing me more stress in the long run because you just keep doing the same thing instead of finding a solution? What do you need to actually just fix it? Okay, consider that. The next question is, how do you know when you're living in your elevated neutral? What does it feel like? What do you notice? What are some observations that will be like, oh my gosh, this is it. I just had a moment literally just a second ago when I looked over out my window and was like, oh my gosh, the sunset is doing its thing and it looks so yummy. Okay. What is that for you? What is the thing that lets you know, oh, I am here? So like things could be bumpy, but I am here. And then one more question. How often are you truly present for the good moments already in your life? These questions aren't about perfection, okay? They're about refinement. The more you practice noticing yourself, noticing your life, noticing what works, noticing when you're irritated, noticing when you're not, the clearer all of this stuff gets, okay? And none of it's going to happen overnight. Being committed to the road to humaning well still counts. Okay. This is a lifelong experience. We're just doing our best, honestly, to make it as dope as possible. So forgive me for my rambly episode. That's the episode. I appreciate you for tuning in and thank you for being patient with me. And I will see you next week.